Ladies and gentlemen, it's the first episode, Flamingo Sundays with Jack Henderson. Now, I'm sure a lot of you, it is Sunday, you're probably listening to this mid-morning and you could be hungover, so this will be a beautiful voice you're going to listen to. On the other end of the microphone, I have Chris Gray from Your Empire. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, good to see you, Jack.
Mate, very, very good to see you. So, I thought it was only fitting to get you on, Chris. We've got a bit of a background.
A bit of history.
Bit of history, mate. Good and bad. So, for people who don't know, Chris was my mentor when I first, started investing in property, and now he's turned into a really good friend of mine. So I thought it was only fitting to get him on the podcast as the first guest. So, mate, welcome. I guess we'll start off, Chris, for the few people who don't know. Mate, tell us who you are essentially and what you do.
Sure. So accountant from the UK, basically worked out at 22 that it was cheaper to buy a 3-bedroom house than a 1-bedroom unit because I could rent 2 rooms out and live for free.
Right.
And bought well and got 2 years' salary overnight. So
Okay.
I bought a £100,000 place for 80 grand and I was earning £10,000 and my mortgage was 7 or 8 times my income. But basically the numbers worked out. And that's when I started to realise that there's a different way to things rather than having a typical career as an accountant, earning lots of money, buying a house, paying it off. I was trying to get from A to Z, but to get there the quickest possible way.
Okay.
Then come to Australia. By then had about 6 properties. Was at Deloitte's, earning about 80,000 before tax, 60,000 after tax.
How much of that went into beer?
Probably a lot of it.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I had 6 properties rising at 600 grand a year.
Right.
So that was the early 2000s, the boom then. And so I tried to justify my job, 600 grand for doing nothing, 60 grand for working at Deloitte's 40 hours a week, and that's when I gave up work. And from there, people just said, oh, how'd you do it? So I started teaching people, and people believed what I said because I had no vested interest. So I didn't sell property, I didn't sell mortgages, didn't sell anything because I had no job. And so I just became a trusted face of property because I'd done it, so I was sharing my experience.
Yeah.
And so that's where I started getting on TV because I needed something to do, so I was doing TV shows. And then people said, oh, can you teach me? And then a few years later they said, just do it for me. And that's where the buyer's agents thing started in 2008, which was kind of fairly early days for buyer's agency.
Especially in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And so for the last 10 years I've done Sky News for the last 10 years and had a buyer's agency, and I've travelled the world speaking about property, helping wonderful people like yourselves and promoting the industry but really most of it is just living a lifestyle. So that's my mantra is not about making the most money, I want to live the biggest life.
Yeah, and I guess that, for me, being a 17-year-old kid, I think I was when we first interacted, that's what attracted me to you. There was a lot of property people out there and they all sell different things and different strategies, but not many of them drove a Lamborghini and had a boat on the harbour and lived a life of freedom, which you did. So that's what attracted me to you.
And I guess what a lot of people realise after a while is they can see the superficial side, especially with all that social media, which wasn't around in those days.
Yeah.
But most people that actually know me know that I'm not hung up on it. So when I have a boat, I have a syndicated boat because it's cheaper. I've got a car that actually appreciates in value, so it's like, it's now 15 years old, the Lambo. And I paid $250 for a $750 car, and now it's worth maybe $300 or $350.
Yeah.
So I'm always doing something differently, and I'm not hung up on the wealth, but I like enjoying life at the same time.
Exactly, and I think that's something that sort of separates you from a lot of people, especially in the eastern suburbs, where we live, is a lot of people attach themselves to material things. So, they I guess, present themselves with they're really cool because they drive a certain car or they have a certain boat, and that's what makes them so great. But you're completely different
because they blend in. So all the agents have all got Mercedes
Exactly.
or BMWs. They're all black. They go to the car wash every Monday morning. Whereas my fun cars now is a 1912 Model T, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which was I think $30,000.
Yeah.
And my other favourite car is a stretch limousine, which cost me $22,000, 85 Cadillac, that I kind of do the bush rallies around Australia.
Yeah.
So I'm not into flash cars anymore. Like I've still got the Lambo, but my passion's into driving, and I don't care what I drive. I'm actually doing a truck license at the moment, so I drive a fire engine.
Okay, and how long does it take you to get from your place to the kids' schools and back on school pickup in Chitty?
So it depends if it breaks down or not.
Yeah.
So I'm well known by NRMA, by most of the trucks.
Yeah, I've seen you a few times on New Southhead Road, mate. Just
breaking down, causing traffic jams.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the truck drivers, they love the car so much they'll actually, rather than just drop me the other side of the tunnel, they'll take me all around Sydney, deliver me back home, because they all have the car. And I try and give them money, they won't take it. And this is the thing, is I'm just trying to put out, is I just want to hang around nice people, do nice things, it's a bit of fun.
Yeah.
And
I guess that's why you like hanging out with me, right? Because I'm a nice guy and I
exactly.
have a lot of fun.
But again, is your thing is when one of the first things where we met is I was doing some work for a charity, and I think it was something to do with mentoring, and I think looking after kids and stuff like that.
That's right.
And I think you paid maybe, was it $1,000 or $2,000?
$1,500, I think.
Yeah, to have a 1 hour session with me. And then I realised you were young, I think you were 21, 22.
And I said, well, I was 18 then, yeah.
All right. If you paid that much money, well, okay, let's make it fun. Let's go to Kingsley's, let's have a proper lunch, a few drinks.
Yeah.
And make it 2 or 3 hours and make the most of it, because you give money to charity as a young kid.
Yeah.
That most 18-year-olds would never spend $1,500.
Yeah. And that was another thing where I was like, wow. Like I remember the email I got was like, I was expecting to come to my office and we can have a 1 hour meeting in between all the other board meetings, but you said, hey, let's go to Kingsley's on Woolloomooloo Wharf. And because I didn't grow up in this lifestyle as well, I grew up in Western Sydney, that was like, wow, I've never eaten in places like this, and you're around all the crazy environment that is Sydney. So that was like, it really sparked my interest even more.
But one of the, I'm trying to think who it was, one of the probably US speakers said, make work fun.
Yeah.
Is if you've got to have a meeting, no one says you've got to have it in a boring office looking at a blank wall. Let's have it on the harbour and have some fun and make it enjoyable.
Exactly. Chris, one of the big questions I had, because everyone asks me this, is why do people of your success, whether that be in property or in business or anything in life, why do people when they get to the top want to help or mentor? Like what drives you to do that? Because essentially you don't have to do it. It doesn't really give you any value. And especially someone like me, I was 18, essentially I couldn't afford to use your business and buy the property that you were buying. So I was really no value to your life from a monetary perspective. So
sure.
what drove you to help?
So look, there's a few different things, and there'll be the skeptics out there that'll say the usual kind of things. So part of it with property, and this is more the detail side, is property is really good for creating wealth. So I'm buying $1 million Bondi units waiting for them to jump to 2 million.
Yeah.
But the reality is these days versus 15 years ago is you've still got to have an income. So I've still got a business because I need to have an income on top of my rents to then service the mortgages, which then means that I can pull the equity out and then buy more and more property or pull my wealth out.
Right.
So part of it's that I still need an income. It's very hard to give up work completely these days and just retire on property. So that's part of it. But the main thing is even though I've got my business, probably 90% of my time I give away for free. I do free seminars, all the TV work was generally for free. As you know, I help charities and I help lots of other people. And if someone asks for help, then I help them. And part of it's the giving back. Then people would say, well, someone helped me, they didn't charge me, and so I'm happy giving back.
Yeah.
But I just love talking about property.
Right.
So I was on the island, like a boat over Christmas, and someone, I think it was Boxing Day, or the day after, and some barrister started talking about property, and he said, oh, you must be sick of this. And I said, no, I love it, because I'm not into the clubby scene and all that kind of stuff. So I'm chat property for half an hour and have a few beers, I'm more than happy.
Yeah, right.
And that's the thing, is I just love it, and I get to talk about myself, and it's my favourite subject. and that's what you get with speakers, is what better conversation than talk about me.
Exactly.
And so everyone's got a bit of ego in there as well. And I could never understand at school, why would anyone become a school teacher? You're lowly paid, the kids are abusing you, and it's a pretty tough job.
Yeah.
But when you do it as an adult, the only people that are asking you stuff or you're teaching them are people that have paid you or they're just learning you doing for free, but they really respect you, and you never know, you put out good stuff and good stuff comes back, so it's all good karma.
Yeah.
So when I met you originally, I didn't think, right, what can I get out of this guy? It's become a household name, be nice to everyone, and then when the wealthy people come along, they can pay the fees, and so 90% of the stuff I don't charge for.
Yeah.
And the wealthy ones that can afford it and see the value of paying $1 to make $2, if I make them $2, they're happy to pay me $1 or 20 cents or whatever.
Right, so there's a few different reasons, because like you said, there is a lot of skeptics out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people feel like, oh, when someone helps you with success, they all think, oh, what does he want from me?
Yeah.
He wants money, or he wants me to do something for him.
Yeah.
And a lot of people doubt when someone just wants to do good for the reason of being good.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, if you're so I'm an accountant, so I'm black and white, I've got no emotion or anything, but for the people that are into reading body language or voices or things like that, people then say when they look at me, as soon as the subject turns to property, my eyes are wide, I'm cheery, I'm happy, I'm energised, I'm like on Red Bull.
Yeah.
But if they're talking about football or politics, I'm in the back of a conversation in a pub or something, I've got no interest at all.
Right.
And so that's what should really show that I have got a passion, because it just suddenly fires up.
Exactly, and I'm the same. Property is like my, I guess, dynamite, right? You hear about it, and it doesn't matter what comment. You can be in the pub and be 4 kilometres away from someone talking about it, and you hear it, and you're straight over to chat, right?
So if you're a real blokey bloke and you suddenly got a job as a TV presenter on Fox Sports, people say, why'd you do the job? Well, I get paid for it and I love it.
Exactly.
Why wouldn't I? That's the perfect job.
It's a shame we can't get paid to drink beer.
Exactly.
That's the thing, because mate, I reckon the chief would hire me.
And then I'd probably be 200 kilos.
Mate, look, obviously property is your forte.
Yeah.
That's what's built you a lot of wealth over, I wouldn't say 40 years, we'll take it back 30 years, make you sound a little bit
22 to 48, 26, yeah.
Mate, obviously the climate's changed quite a lot, right? Since you started in the UK as well, and obviously moved to Australia. Since you started in property, a lot has changed with property itself, what people are living in now compared to what they were living in 20 years ago. Finance, the economy, how things are moving with automation, all the rest of it. I guess for the next sort of 10 or 15 minutes, what I'd really like to chat about is, if you were to start again, let's go back, Chris Gray's just turned 22, we just walked out of the pub, getting home at 2 a.m, and you wanted to buy this first property to get out of home. Let's give the listeners a little bit of a roadmap so they can take something away from this and go, this is how Chris would do it.
Sure.
So mate, at a very high level, if you were starting again now, let's run through it. So obviously the first thing to getting into property is saving the deposit or getting someone to help you with that.
Yeah, I think the step before that is the motivation, it's the why, which is a classic thing in anything in life, is what is your motivation for doing it. So my motivation was, I'd had a year off in Australia, came back home, mum gave me a midnight curfew, I'm saying, no mum, I don't want to come out at midnight, I've travelled back from Australia, I can get back from the local pub. Mm-hmm. And that was my catalyst to move.
Yeah.
Now, most of my friends' other parents hadn't given them that. They didn't have the curfews, and so they had no motivation to move out of their big houses that was nice and clean and comfortable. Because like anything about getting fit or anything is like that, you only do it when you're motivated by pain. The pleasure doesn't normally draw you as much as the pain, whereas my pain was, I've got to be back by midnight.
Want to drink more beer.
Yeah, exactly. I want to go off and have fun, have mates over and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the really big thing now is you need to be motivated to do it, and you need to find the reasons, whatever they are, whether it's kind of pleasure or pain.
Right.
Then it's a case of, if that why is big enough, you'll do whatever it takes. Because in my case, I was looking at all these, I earned £10,000, so I could afford £30,000, so $60,000.
Yeah.
A crappy studio unit, which is the equivalent of what a 20-year-old could afford here. Not in the best suburb, in the worst suburb.
Well, yeah.
And I just didn't want to live in one of those.
Yeah.
So I went window shopping at all the beautiful ones, and then that's what I want. I want that beautiful thing. I want the BMW or the Porsche or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, what have I got to do to go and try and get that? And the difference now is there's books, there's seminars, there's podcasts, there's TV shows, there's magazines. All the knowledge is out there. There's no excuse these days. Whereas 26 years ago, there was none of that. Robert Kiyosaki wasn't around, none of the stuff. And so I was just lucky that I had an accounting brain that I could suddenly work the numbers out.
Right.
So if I was a kid now, is knowledge is the power. The only reason I did more than most other people is I built the knowledge and then I took action. So the knowledge to start with, books. The books are the best 20 or 30 bucks that you can spend.
Yeah.
And you get it from the library anyway, and there is libraries still around.
There's libraries now on your phone,
yeah.
Amazon and
there's
Kindle and all
so much information.
Yeah.
So one of the shows I did was the Renovators on Channel 10. I had to be a specialist on renovations.
Right.
And even though I did them, I never got my hands dirty. And so one weekend before the show, I went and bought 10 books and I read them over the weekend. And you're going to get 80% of the information, and by the time you get on the 7th, 8th, 9th book, most of the stuff is the same stuff repeated.
Yeah.
So you can do the same thing in property. Subscribe to all the magazines, all their CD offers and free reports and the rest of it, subscribe to all of that stuff, and you're going to get so much information, but you're never going to understand everything. But I reckon if you give yourself 3 or 6 months to read everything, you're going to have the majority of the knowledge.
Right. Okay.
And you've got 80% of it, and over the next 20 years you can get the other 20%. but you can get the first 80% really, really quickly.
Right. So that's the first thing. First thing, if you were 20, 22 years old right now, was education. And education comes so easy in today's environment. Not like you have to go and search for the education. It's at our fingertips.
Well, it was like self-taught, so there was just no one. And I remember seeing a place in St Albans where I bought, and it was next to a car park. And I thought, is this a good positive or a negative?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, there's no parties on a Saturday night in a car park, so that's a positive. But obviously, in the middle of the day in rush hour, then it's going to be a bad thing at the weekend.
Yeah.
But whereas these days you can read up about that stuff and Google it, and so it's super easy.
Exactly.
So then the next thing is, yes, it's getting a deposit and a mortgage.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people now is to try and save your own deposit is almost impossible, and especially if you're in the good suburbs. But there's so many mortgage brokers now that talk about parental guarantees. So most of our parents have made money from property, depending on your age.
Yeah.
And most parents that I found dealing with our clients, they want to give their kids a help start, but they're not going to gift it to them because they're going to be spoiled little brats.
Yeah.
So just like I did with my first property, I pitched my dad. And I said, Dad, by myself, I can afford a 1-bedroom studio. I'm going to have no money. I'm not going to be able to see you and Mum because I was trying to do the whole playing card thing exactly on Mum. Mum doesn't want me to move out, but I can't afford to live anywhere decent. But I said, the numbers on a 3-bedroom house, it works out cheaper. Now I don't want a handout from you. All I need is your tick-off guarantee with the bank, which they do still these days.
Yeah.
And within a few years, I'm going to be earning enough money, or the property price will go up, so I can release you from your guarantee. Now, my dad wasn't going to see me go bankrupt, but at the same time, he realised a good quality property in a good area, and having 2 tenants in there, was a good business proposition.
Exactly. And it made him feel good for helping you.
Yeah. And I reckon there's a whole bunch of other parents out there. Again, the skeptics are going to say, well, it's all right for you had rich parents, that you kind of gifted it, handed on the lap, but it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
If you want to believe that, then it's fine. But there's plenty of people like Nathan Birch that we know in common that western suburbs, uneducated, until he educated himself, didn't come from a wealthy family, did it, and if there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly.
You can always go and do it. Later on, I did it with strangers. I did a joint venture with a stranger. You find someone at work who's on maybe a high income, and you've got the deposit, or if you've got the high income, then you go and find someone that's got a deposit that hasn't got the income.
Exactly. And now, since obviously January 1 this year, you've got the first home buyer home loan guarantee, where the government will guarantee the other 15% of the loan. You've got stamp duty exemptions. Like I say to people every single day, there has never been a better time in Australia, New South Wales especially, I believe, to be a first home buyer. Like there is nothing. Essentially, you can spend up to $650. So 650, 5%. You're spending. Let's say you're saving $30,000 for round numbers.
Yeah.
People spend 20 or 30 grand every year to go to Europe or to buy a new car, or like there's so many.
The iPhone and whatever else.
Exactly, yeah.
And the bottom line is you've got to work hard. So between 20 and 27, I worked a full-time job at Kodak, and it wasn't me that sent it bust. It went bust many years after that. But I did a full-time job as an accountant.
Yeah.
At 5 o'clock I left work. I travelled an hour up to central London, and then I studied accounting 4 nights a week, Monday to Thursday at night school. Got back at probably 10 or 10:30 at night. Friday night I had off. Saturday and Sunday I then had to study all my accounting and the rest of it.
Right.
And then I had to look at property at the same time. And so where people say, oh, it's all right for you, you're an accountant. Yeah, sure, it's great. I love working 5 to 7 years night school when all my mates are out drinking.
Exactly.
It's all right for you, yeah, you bought some property. Yeah, but I had to have more mortgage than most people have ever have in their life, 7 times my income, and I've got to deal with all that stress.
Exactly. And then on top of that, like you just said, when things aren't going so great in the last 12 months, it's all well and good when you've only got one property, or when you've got $10 million
of debt. My debt's over $10 million.
Yeah.
So 1% increase in interest rates is another 100 grand a year.
Exactly.
So I'm going to find 100 grand.
Around.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Gray, another 100.
Yeah.
So mate, look, we've got that down packed. It's education is key, and then there is many different avenues now to get finance.
Because the downside of education is people then get confused.
Analysis paralysis,
exactly, and they do nothing, and most people don't do anything.
Yeah. So
that's the other thing is you've just got to take some action. It doesn't matter if you buy a 100 grand car park, a property in regional Australia, Bondi Beach, doesn't matter. Just do something.
Yeah.
Because generally it's never that bad.
Exactly.
I mean, avoid a mining town and stuff like that.
Exactly. Maybe 10% of the decisions people make around property could be bad, but 90% of them are. quite rewarding.
But by reading all these books, you can get a strategy that's 80% okay, that you're not making too bad a mistake in a way.
Exactly.
So go and get a valuation, don't be in one industry town,
Yeah.
and you can't go too far wrong.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, education, finance, and I guess the next thing is in property, especially with asset selection, getting the asset selection right. Now, in this day and age, like we were saying, the information's out there. Every man and his dog has a new strategy. Should you do positive cash flow? Should you buy in, regional town? Should you buy in blue chip? And everyone's got different comparisons, and they all fudge the numbers to make one look better than the other. So it was very, very hard to know what to believe. From your perspective, and I guess we've both got very, very similar strategies, let's just say the average first home buyer in Australia probably has a budget of, say, $650 if we use things. Even with $650, you can still get in very, very blue chip parts of Australia.
You can still get in Sydney.
Exactly. I looked at a one better yesterday in Coogee. 200 metres from the beach. It was under 50 square metres, 45 square metres, but a lot of lenders will lend on that now.
Yeah.
And it was $620,000.
Yeah.
So like you're in the most blue chip suburb in one of the most blue chip suburbs in Australia, and you're in there for a first time buyer price.
So look, the weird thing is the strategy that I had at 22, even though I've done Sky News for 10 years and done something like 400 shows, interviewed all the experts I need, so I could get to anyone pretty much, my strategy hasn't changed, which is really weird.
Yeah.
And so my strategy came from, is I thought if you rent a property to someone that's got a good job, they're going to pay the rent.
Yeah.
They don't want to lose their job, or they don't want their employer to find out they haven't paid it because they'll risk their job.
Yeah.
And so they're going to look after it. And that has stood me well for 30 years effectively. Because even in the global financial crises and the crashes and stuff like that, good people with professionals, they still have jobs. And if you're buying in those inner city areas, there is no more property.
Exactly.
Because you're not buying around the high rises. And so the biggest thing I learned from a guy called John Edwards from Residex, who's one of the real long-termers in the industry for capital growth, he said no matter what happens in the market and first homeowner grants and wages not keeping up with inflation, supply and demand. And if you've done economics at school, it's the basic things.
Yeah.
If there's no more of something, i.e. it's all fully built up, 3-story height limits, no more properties, and lots of people want it and those people have got money, they'll pay more money.
Exactly. And that's why areas like Point Piper and Darling Point and all the rest of it can have houses worth 20, 30, 40, 50, $100 million.
Yeah.
That seems way out of reach for the majority of Australians, but there is people with that sort of money.
But it's more, not so much the expensive stuff, but it's more just like you said in the Coogee.
But being around the affluence in the wealth. So if people can spend $100 million on a property, your $1 million apartment or even your $500,000 apartment is not a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds wrong, but that's reality of life.
Yeah, so this isn't a debate. We're not debating what is right for society and morals and ethics and all the rest of it. We're saying that's the situation. Sure, if you want to change it in your spare time, change it.
Yeah.
But that's the way it is. So do you go with it or do you go and fight it?
Exactly.
So 45 square metre unit in Coogee Beach, there's not that many beaches in Sydney. It's close to the city. 45 isn't going to suit that many people, but it still gets you into the suburb. There's lots of wannabes that will live in a tiny little unit just to be in Coogee.
100%, and that's the thing, especially now in this new economy, like we're talking about how you would do it right now, there is more and more wannabes in this world. There is more people that want to pretend to have money than actually do have money with flashy cars and renting suits and watches and all the rest of it. So that could actually work.
I almost saw the perfect one in Bondi about 10 years ago. It's opposite the Swiss Grand, which is now the Pacific.
Right.
And in the kitchen, I think it's a 1-bedroom unit, the kitchen bench top was the size of a Domino's pizza box. And I know you eat pizza, so I know you know what the size is.
100%, yeah.
But it had 3 cars, like all in like in a line. So you had 3 car spaces and a pizza box. Like, who needs a kitchen? People will be coming in, there's no kitchen here. What young person cooks and when you're opposite the beach?
Uber Eats now, yeah.
But you've got 3 mates that can come around and park their cars 100 metres from the beach.
And you can say you live in Bondi Beach.
Exactly.
And that's what it's all about, perception, right? Okay, so that's covered asset selection. The big thing for me, what I wanted to cover in this, is the illusion, and you'll be able to clarify this, that people can buy millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of property on an average Australian income.
Yeah.
So I see constantly people are told they can buy 10 properties or 5 properties, or you read the stories every single day. And they have these massive, passive income portfolios and they retire in 10 years.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, demyth this. And
Sure.
and from your perspective, we know how hard it is because we're in it every day to get finance.
Yeah.
It's not easy, and it's a lot harder now than it was 10 years ago with low doc and no doc loans.
Yeah.
So I guess from your perspective, what aspiration or what can people work towards in terms of what is realistic in this day and age of a portfolio to achieve with an average Australian income for an average battler out there who's got, you know, $150,000 to $200,000 joint family income with a couple of kids? Like, is it really achievable to have 10 million now?
Sure. Look, it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
And so I think property investing at this current time, so 2020, is finance.
Yeah.
Once you bought 1 or 2 properties, buying another property, getting the tenants, doing all that stuff is easy. You can send an email, there's buyer's agents, there's mortgage brokers, everyone can do it for you.
Yeah.
And they almost pay for themselves with the money they save you or make you on those kind of deals. So now everything is about getting finance. In the old days, or 10 years ago, you could get low doc loans, tick a box, they lend you 80%. That doesn't happen now.
Yeah.
But it's still changing. So 2017-18, you almost couldn't buy anything. But now in 2020, things are changing. Interest rates are coming down, serviceability rates for the banks are coming down, it is getting easier and easier, and even people like APRA that control the banks, then they're trying to make it easier to let people borrow more money.
Yeah.
And so 1 year you might be able to borrow $1 million, the next year you might be able to borrow 2, and then 3, and then back down to 1 again. And so it's a constantly changing thing.
Right.
But I think what's going to change over the next few years is more and more people will do things like joint ventures together.
Yeah.
So maybe they've got the equity in their property, they haven't got the serviceability, so they're stopped by the banks, but they can joint venture with someone else that has got the income.
Right.
I think there's going to be more peer-to-peer lending. So i.e. wealthy people, like very wealthy people, that suddenly they're only getting 1% in the bank, and so they'll start doing almost private lending to people. And we've all seen the apps. You go on Facebook, there's apps for borrowing $500, for borrowing $5,000, payday loans, all stuff like that.
Yeah.
I reckon soon there will be payday loan for $1 million or something.
Yeah.
And people, sure, you might pay 1 or 2% extra interest rates, but if you're still making money, it doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
And I think there's going to be more property funds as well. That suddenly, if you've only got that 10 grand,
things like BrickX and stuff like that. Right.
all of those fractional ownerships.
Right.
That the argument is if you had $1 million or if you had 100 grand, do you want to buy a place in the middle of nowhere, 1,000 k's from Sydney, or would you rather 10% of a Bondi unit type thing?
Yeah. Okay.
Or if you did have $1 million, why would you put it all into one property or one stock when you diversify? So why not put 50 grand across 20 different assets?
Okay.
So I think people will be more and more open to these kind of things.
Yeah.
Just like, I mean, everyone quotes the Ubers and the Airbnbs, but I think life is changing.
Definitely, the world is definitely changing.
Yeah.
Fractional ownership and everything now is becoming.
But I still think the traditional property investments will still be good.
100%.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts around passive income as well? Everyone aims for passive income.
Yeah.
But I guess people aren't educated around what passive income really means, and
Sure.
when you actually do the numbers in terms of tax and vacancy rates and all the rest of it,
Yeah.
how much $120,000 passive income really is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, is passive income a real thing, or is it the numbers getting bigger and bigger every day? I think to retire on a decent income, it's like you might have to have $300,000 now to retire on $150,000.
So I haven't seen many people do it. So a lot of people talk about these positive cash flow properties, which are typically regional properties. They get 6, 7, maybe 8% return. But as you say, by the time you take off the your mortgage repayments and everything else, maybe you get another $50 a week. Now, for some average Australians, another $50 a week could help them. But the argument against those properties is if it doesn't really rise in value and in 10 years' time it's still worth 500 grand, have you actually really made any money?
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. Whereas I think if you look at some classic things like the Greeks and the Italians, they're always renowned for being able to pay off their loans. And so a lot of them own lots of blocks of units in the eastern suburbs or around Sydney, and they've got $10 million worth of property and it's got no debt. That really is passive income. Exactly. And these guys are earning hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right. And
so I think the reality is for most people is you still need to buy for capital growth, and it's really the $500,000 doubling to $1 million to doubling to $2 million, that's where the money is. And you buy as much property as you can, and then when you get to a certain age, maybe you sell it off, pay off your debt, and then you really have got positive cash flow.
Yeah.
But again, you are going to be paying tax on that.
Exactly, and tax in Australia is
is a lot of money.
Quite lucrative for the government.
And so, as you know, in my Effortless Empire book, a lot of my strategy is more, and this is more sophisticated strategy for later on, but even though you might not do it now, it's something to bear in mind for 5 or 10 years' time, is you actually want to live off the equity.
Yeah.
Because then you don't pay tax on it. Sure, you pay compound interest, which a lot of people won't get straight away, but paying 5 or 6% compound interest is better than paying 50% tax.
Exactly.
But on the big assumption that you can actually draw that equity.
Or you have a business that can keep, the cash flow coming in to borrow more money.
So again, for a lot of the first home buyers out there, they're not going to pick up a lot of that stuff straight away. It doesn't matter, but just keep it in the back of your mind. And as you read more and more things over the years, you'll say, oh yeah, no, I remember that Jack Henderson, very clever guy, and he was speaking to Chris, and they were talking about using equity and things like that.
Okay. Well, mate, I think personally, if I was a young guy starting
Which you
out,
still are.
Exactly. I think that's a pretty good roadmap in terms of where to start and essentially where to get to, and then you can start thinking about different avenues in terms of maybe keep going down a property path, or you can even diversify into different things. And I guess that you have a diversified portfolio. So Chris, this is the first time we've done the podcast, so I'm just making this up on the spot.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah,
that's
exactly,
what
mate. I've been doing it for years. I might let you have the opportunity to ask me a question, and I can answer something that maybe you think I should have asked you, and you can ask me, and I can answer it for the listeners.
Yeah. So again, I guess for you, you've been successful kind of pretty early on in life.
Yeah.
You've come from Newcastle, so not in the heart of this.
Western Sydney. I moved to Newcastle. Everyone think I will live in Newcastle.
So you've upgraded to Newcastle.
Exactly, yeah.
So what was it in you that maybe around your friends, because I assume a lot of your friends haven't done the same thing that you've done.
Yeah.
What made you kind of take all that action and go and pay $1,500 for a lunch and do all this other stuff?
Yeah. I guess it was backing myself into a corner, and like you just spoke about the why. So I backed myself into a corner. I got expelled from school, 2 schools. Life looks pretty dim, right? Everyone thinks you're an idiot because you got expelled from school. Everyone's talking about it. Your parents are having doubts about their own kids if they're going to be anything. So it was like, I didn't doubt myself, but I was like, I have to prove to myself, got a bit of a chip on the shoulder now, that I'm not an idiot and I can do it. So
there's really a choice between being a goat farmer and getting into property.
Exactly, and the goat farmer path didn't look too bright. But it was the why. And even now people look at me and think, oh, you're doing so well, and you got the property and you hang out with cool people and all the rest of it. A lot of the time it looks a lot sexier from the outside than what the reality is. Like I just went through a refinance for my properties before I moved into this industry, and it was like going through hell. And to a point where I thought, I'm going to have to maybe sell some property to be able to do this job, because I earned this massive income. I've leveraged myself to the max on the income I'm on, and now I want to refinance so I can go into a career where I'm essentially commission only. So like it looks really sexy, you hang out with cool people, you're on boats, and it looks like you've got all this money and all the rest of it. But I think perception is something people have to get around as well. Like what you see at face value is not necessarily what real life is, and we see that every single day, especially in the eastern suburbs. You see all this money and fame, and people look like they're doing exceptionally well.
Yeah.
But you never know what's really happening behind closed doors. So I think for me it was the driving factor, and then also when I got into it, it wasn't necessarily about making money. It was like, look, I'm doing this now, I'm meeting cool people. Now it's about what's actually going to make me happy. Because if you're not happy, you can have all the money in the world, know all the people in the world, and do everything. And I've spoken about it before. There's a saying. Everyone says, I'd rather cry in my Ferrari until you're crying in your Ferrari. And that's a real thing, because everyone's always chasing. And when you get to the top and realise everything you've chased was not really making you happy, that's when you realise, well, fuck, it's not money. There's something else going on.
This is a really hard thing, because the parents always tell us that it's not about the size of your house and all these things. But as you said, you almost need to tick it off to say you've got it, to then not worry about it.
Yeah.
Because I had the same with the cars and the houses. So we had a big house, now we live in an apartment. Most people say, why would you live in an apartment? Well, we don't need 3 lounges and 2 dining tables that we use once a year.
Yeah.
And I've had the Lambo, but I have as much fun in the chitty bang bang in the limo. But that's the thing, is you almost need a ticket to try those things to prove it to yourself but it's such a stupid thing. But I think people still need to try and do it.
I 100% agree. I obviously being young as well and seeing all this thing, you think like, oh, it's going to get me more girls, and it's going to, like, you think it's going to do so much more for you than what it really does, you know. And money is the biggest thing, and everyone invests in property essentially to give themselves more money or more freedom. But I think the why has to be more than just the cars and the boats and the holidays. The why has to be. It's for happiness. It's to do what really makes you happy, not to give you the other people the perception that you're doing really, really well and having success and fame and all the rest.
But it's tough because you hear like the Anthony Robbins and all the big speakers that are super wealthy private jets, and they say, oh, it's not about the money, it's all about doing this, and you're saying, bullshit, mate. It's like, I want the money, show me the money.
Yeah.
But again, you're not going to do it until you've ticked it off.
Exactly.
And then you believe it. Just like with the teaching thing again.
Yeah.
You think, why would you do something for free? Well, it's once you've got the money, you realise then it doesn't really matter, and those extra things, you don't necessarily need them.
Personally. Yeah, exactly. Mate, I think this has been how long have we gone for here on the computer? I can't really see. We've had a cracking conversation, mate. I think
exactly, as always.
From not unscripted podcasts, I think we've done
and
quite
sparkling
well.
water.
Exactly right. I was going to get Corona, but I thought we're in the office. There's people walking around.
Quick promotion for Pellegrino.
Yeah, I couldn't even pronounce that, mate. I'm a high school dropout. Mate, thank you very much for being the first guest.
And best of luck.
Thank you, mate.